Before we get started with actual code, I'm going to talk about the concept of REST for a bit. Now, this course is not really about REST per se, so I'm not going to cover it in exhaustive detail. There is a Pluralsight course by Howard Durking that you can check out for a deep dive into the subject, linked here. He talks a great deal about the theory behind REST and references the original concept as created in a dissertation by Roy Fielding. There's also an excellent resource I've linked where you see a programmer explain the concept behind REST to a non-programmer. You've no doubt witnessed at least one or two heated arguments about whether a given system or architecture is really RESTful or not, and perhaps you've even seen the maturity model for telling you how RESTful your system is. Well, the Simple Conversation I've linked is a great resource for a quick explanation of the broad goal of REST, which one might argue is to decouple the location of resources on the internet from the set of actions you can take on those resources. For our purposes in this course, we're going to define a series of resources, namely lights, and we're going to define actions that clients can take on those lights. If we perform a get action on all of the lights, we should get back a list of all of the lights. But if we perform a get action on just one light, we should get just that light, assuming it exists. If we do a post action to the list of lights with a new light, that light should be added to the list of lights. If we delete a specific light, it should be removed from the list. And if we perform a put operation specifying a light and a command, that command should be performed on that light. And furthermore, all of this should be in stateless form in terms of the requests. I shouldn't have to keep track of what's going on with the server to tell it to put a command to the light or to get a list of lights. As a client, I should be able to do that under any circumstances at any time. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, and we'll tackle that wholesale in later clips. For now, let's just focus on two actions and one resource. I want to use JSON to post a message on the Raspberry Pi, and then I want to be able to retrieve that message using GET. For the rest of this module, there's a tool that's going to be invaluable to us, which is Fiddler. So I'm going to go and show you how to download and install that. It's something I have installed but uninstalled for explanation purposes. And because I'm running a newer version of the .NET framework, I'm going to grab the version that's built for .NET 4. If you have a really old version of the .NET framework, you can get the .NET 2 version. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to run this executable and install Fiddler. And it's an incredibly simple install, so much so that I'm not even going to bother cutting away because it will be done momentarily. And it's going to pop us onto this Fiddler first run page. I'm just going to close out of here. And then I will quickly launch Fiddler so you can see what it looks like. There is a lot of functionality built in here that we can use, and you'll see it kind of as we go along through this module. All right, now that Fiddler's installed, it's time to start developing. So the first thing I'm going to do is open the Raspberry Pi here in File Explorer mode so that I can get at and open the source code file in my IDE. I'm going to go to this Pi directory and I'm going to find index.py, which is what we're going to be editing. You'll recall that from the last module where we got it to say hello world. We're going to kind of move on from here. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in and get a command line prompt so I can run commands on the Raspberry Pi itself, as I've been doing in previous modules as well. So we have a command line prompt and we have our file open for editing. The first thing that I'm going to do, since we're going to be dealing in JSON and not just raw strings, is I'm going to return hello world in the JSON format. So I'm going to import the JSON library, and then I'm going to use json.dump_s, which is a Python utility that's going to let me send and format inline an actual JSON message. So here in JSON format, I'm going to say that I have a message called hello world, and I'm going to return that instead of the string hello world. And then I'm going to flip over here to the command line, and I'm going to run the web server by saying sudo python index.py, and then I'm going to specify that I want to run on port 80. And then we'll get a look at Fiddler here as I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to show you what it looks like to execute a GET request to the Raspberry Pi. So it's already keyed in there. I'm going to execute that, and then there's a 200, and look at that. Voila, it's given us back JSON. Now that we've had some success there, the next thing I'm going to want to do is go back over to the source code. And it's a little goofy to have this being routed to the root. So I'm going to create a URL called message. and I want to route to that. I want that to be what's returning the messages. So I'm going to run the web server again just really quickly and show you what this looks like. That if we go to this original route, which is just the root of our site, now I'm going to execute a GET request, and there's a 404 because it's not routed there. So what I have to do is I have to type in message, and there you can see is our JSON as we would expect. Now at this point, I'd like to go back to the source file and make sort of a refactoring kind of change that's going to help us out later. And what I want to do is I don't want the get method simply by itself to dream up what's going to be returned. That's sort of functionally useless. What we need to do is start having a concept of storing state between calls to these methods. So in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is introduce a static class level variable called message. And I'm going to initialize the JSON in this message, and then I'm going to have the get method return that instead. So I'm going to have the get method return hello.message. And then I just want to go back over to Fiddler to make sure this works. I believe in a lot of kind of iterative short feedback cycles as you go. Let's check our work to make sure everything looks good here. So what I expect is if I rerun this same request, I'm going to see JSON, and let's take a look, and yep, there's our message. So we're good to go on that front. So for the coup de grace here of hello world, I want to allow the user to specify via post what the hello world message is going to be, and then we'll give it back instead of us specifying it as a hard-coded value on initialize. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be returning an actual encoded JSON message to the user because I'm going to be decoding whatever the user gives to us. So I'm going to define a post method, and whatever JSON the user specifies, I want to decode that coming in and store it locally in hello.message. And then I want to replay it for the user. So let's take a look here at what this looks like. And I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to relaunch the web server. And we'll go play around with it a bit in Fiddler. And so the first thing I'm going to do is get a look at what happens when we compose a brand new message. Let me clear all these guys out so we have a fresh start. So here is what we would expect. We're seeing an empty JSON string, and that's it, because that's what it starts off as. Now I'm going to post a hello message, and what we're going to hope to see here is that after posting this, it's going to be stored in the static state of that class, and then repeated back in a get. So we're going to execute this post, and we're going to see that that execution was successful. So let's see if it was really successful by executing a get. And the reason Fiddler goes red there is because get's not supposed to take a request body. So hey, there's our message. That's good news. Now let's do another test, because what should happen is if we post a different message, we should now see that updated, because that's telling us that we're truly being interactive in this new hello world paradigm. So let's upload a message called something else via post, and we'll execute this request and hope for a 200. And there we go. Now let's go back and do another get and confirm that we're seeing this new message with something else in it. And there it is, voila. So we now have a fully interactive hello world implementation upon which to build. And next up, we're going to be turning a light on and off, kind of building on this implementation.